Hello, welcome back to Blender Sushi LiveNoding. In this episode, I will be creating this geometry node setup. This is pretty much the result. And if you select the cube, we can control the distance threshold approximations. All right, so this is actually something that's actually from Blender Live, and I just trying to recreate it from scratch. Just to get the point. All right, so I'm gonna delete everything except for this default cube. So with the default cube, we can subdivide so we can have more resolution to work with. And as you subdivide, it's become like a sphere, but you can always use the simple, whichever you like. I like this one. And if we use geometry nodes on top of this, we're gonna be using this mesh, which is pos modifier. So it's already subdivided, so we can start to do some instancing. So let's save this very quickly. So this is compare. So with this guy over here, normally if we want to start to distribute some points, we want to start with something like a mask or some kind of vertex group, right? So vertex weighting. In order to do this inside geometry nodes modifier, we need to, maybe we can use something like a compare. So attribute compare. And I will create a Suzanne head, just to be very clear. And I'm gonna scale this smaller. So we have Suzanne, and we have this default cube that has been subdivided. Now we want to bring in Suzanne head position. And we want to use the location of Suzanne head. Okay, so the locations will be a vector position. So we can plug it like that. I think this should work. And the geometry, we can pass in the geometry position, which is coming from this guy. Maybe I need to reverse this. So let's see if this is working. As a result, we want to have mask. And let's distribute some points. And use the mask as density. So apparently this does not seem to be working. Okay. So it works if we use equal, not greater than or less than, because we are comparing vector position of this Suzanne head and the attribute, which is the position of this geometry. Okay, so that's cool, that makes sense. So now we have this ability to control the threshold, which we can just pass in outside here. And we have control over the points and Suzanne. Right, so let's create a bunch of instance object. So we have this torus and the icosphere. Let's give this color. So this is orange, and this one can be pink, like the donuts. Okay, now we want to instance this into the cube, and we can also use point separate. So let's see if this is working. this is distribute points based on the mask area, but we can also use the mask to separate the geometry points. Okay, so this is where things start to get more interesting. It's a little bit like instance modifier actually. So icosphere and torus. So either this one or this one. From this we can join the geometry. Now we can control something like this. So currently with this setup we don't have control over how far the distance, but at least with this attribute compare, we can sort of have some kind of field, you know, like making some kind of areas. So because we started with nothing really, but once we have another object like Suzanne or like a empty locator, we can start to make comparison, and from comparison we can create mask, and from this mask we can separate the objects and then instance the area like so. So I think that's really cool and interesting knowledge to understand before we go even further. So let's go back to our cube. We get sphere, join geometry. This is point instancing. We can randomize the scale. Let's do this. Anyways, we already know the drill. Maybe ambient occlusion just to make it a little bit nicer. So on my computer is kind of already a little bit slow, but your computer might be able to handle this. Alright, so that's kind of nice. With the icosphere looks nice like that. For the torus, however, maybe I want to randomize the rotations. So this -3, oops, vector -3 and 3 and randomize. So slightly more interesting now. So we still have control over the cube. You can subdivide it more or less, and I can also control the instance and etc. If you really want to do something, you can actually use stretch of nodes to do a lot more already. So it's stretch of, say we have this set up already, right? And we have control over the result with Suzanne. So if we with stretch of, you generate something like what do you like, cylinder? Let's try generator. Oops, okay. Sometimes the node just need to be reloaded. Yeah, I need to restart alpha, and sometimes that happens. So compare. The more I work with geometry nodes, the more I actually remember shader nodes. And if you know shader nodes, it's easier to work with geometry nodes. So let's actually create like a cylinder and then output it as something. and move this to the side. So the cylinder I can turn on the wireframe so we can see the resolution, and then I can actually simply select this and select this, and then Control L, copy the modifier. So now we have similar thing happening. Of course, with this guy, we can control the subdivision and the threshold. So you might notice something weird happening there. The cylinder, because the way we use matrices here, it's gonna give this result. However, if you use apply matrix for vertices, you're gonna get a different result. There you go. So Suzanne is now the center. Okay, so you know the drill, this one, you can also create a torus or actually box. Here, another mesh viewer, plug this in. Let's use matrix. So increase the resolution of the box, and perhaps even do like displays, noise displays. You have to be a little bit more random. Control the scale. Okay. Alright, so we can increase the size of the cube, and in the same drill, assign geometry nodes and geometry nodes, but using this. Oops. Okay. Alright, so now it works. So because the geometry from SpreadChalk is generated in real time, so you can make changes and it's still gonna work. Okay, yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? Very cool. So now we understand how to use the mask of geometry nodes and how we can just simply pass the setup from one object to another. In the future, I will try to use maybe something like dynamic paint. But this is pretty cool because of this one thing, attributes compare. We can now have control over all of this separately, actually. So each one of them can have different value, but can still be influenced by Suzanne. Alright, so this is just the basic, but hopefully you find this interesting and useful. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.